Day one of the NHL free agent frenzy has been insane, especially as a Red Wings fan. I'm really excited Steve Yzerman woke up today and decided he wanted to try and sign everybody. I got a lot to say about today. This is probably going to be one of the longest videos I've ever uploaded, and I'm really sick right now. You can probably tell by my voice, so that's unfortunate, but we're going to grind through this anyways. And just as a heads up, I'm only going to be covering the players that signed with the new team. I'm not going to go over extensions and stuff like that, because then the video would literally almost be an hour long. I'm just going to go in the order that Cap Rentley has the deals listed at. So starting off, the first deal of the day, this one came in like 1 minute after free agency opened, so you can't tell me there was no tampering going on here, but the deal is Jack Campbell signs a 5-year, $25 million deal with the Oilers, so an AAV of $5 million. So the Oilers finally get their long-term option in net, and I think $5 million per season is more than fair for Jack Campbell. Sure, he had some ups and downs this past year, but when you look at his tenure as a whole with the Maple Leafs, for that time period, he was one of the better goaltenders in the league. I'm a little bit confused as to why the Maple Leafs were okay with trading for Matt Murray and having him on the books for $4.75 million, but not wanting to give Campbell this kind of deal at just $250K more. I guess maybe it had to do with term or something, but apparently the Leafs didn't even offer Campbell a deal, so I don't really know what was going on there. But nonetheless, I like this move for the Oilers. They just made the conference finals and they got better today, so I would say that's a win. The next deal is another one involving a goaltender. The Toronto Maple Leafs get a 1B option for Matt Murray. Ilya Samsonov signs a 1-year, $1.8 million deal with Toronto after not being qualified by Washington. To me, this is one of the better value deals of the day. I know Ilya Samsonov wasn't great this past season, but he showed a lot of promise throughout his first couple seasons with Washington, had some great moments, and let's not forget that this was a guy before he came over to the NHL who was talked about along with Sorokin and Shesterkin as being one of the better goaltending prospects in the league. He's only 25. There's still some potential there, I think. 25 is relatively young when it comes to goaltenders. This was a no-brainer of a signing by Toronto. 1 year, $1.8 million, going to be an RFA at the end of the deal as well, so the Maple Leafs can retain his rights if they want to. No matter what happens, this was a really good bet by Toronto. Next up, the Tampa Bay Lightning signed defenseman Ian Cole to a 1-year, $3 million contract. He spent this past season with the Carolina Hurricanes, played 75 games. Real solid middle to bottom pairing defensive defenseman. Should help Tampa replace some of that defensive depth that they lost with the likes of McDonough going to Nashville and Jan Rutta leaving in free agency. Next, the Vancouver Canucks signed Curtis Lazar to a 3-year, $3 million deal, so a cap hit of $1 million per season. I think this is actually a really underrated get for the Vancouver Canucks. To me, Curtis Lazar is really like the ideal fourth line center. He's a really good forechecker, good in the face-off circle, and he actually put up career highs across the board offensively this past season as well. A really solid depth add for Vancouver. At $1 million a season, I feel like it can't go wrong. Next up, another really minor deal here. Kevin Rooney signs a 2-year, $2.6 million deal with the Calgary Flames, so a $1.3 million AAV. Not a whole lot to unpack here. Rooney is a physical, defense-first fourth liner, should be able to chip in between 5 to 8 goals a season. Next up, we have one of the bigger contracts that were given out today. Vincent Trocheck signs a 7-year, $39.375 million deal with the New York Rangers. So the Rangers get their number 2 center. As of right now, the time I'm recording this, Ryan Strome is still a UFA. Can't imagine he's coming back now after this Trocheck deal. I like Vincent Trocheck a lot. I think Rangers fans are going to like him as well. He's a guy that can do a little bit of everything. He's good in the face-off circle, can be productive on both special teams, the power play and the penalty kill. I think the cap hit is more than fair for what Trocheck can bring to the table. I'd really only worry about the term on this deal. That's the only kind of red flag, I guess you can say, because at the end of it, Trocheck will be, 36 years old? So maybe the last year or two of this deal won't look as hot, but hey, that's a long ways down the road anyways. Next up, we have Nicholas Aubé-Kubel signing a 1-year, $1 million deal with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Scored a career-high 11 goals and 22 points this past season. Obviously is now a Stanley Cup champion as he won it with the Avs. Also dropped and dented the Stanley Cup in the team photo. If Aubé-Kubel can be as productive with the Leafs as he was in a bottom 6 role with the Avalanche this past season, I think the Leafs will be happy with this, and again, it's 1 year, $1 million, so even if he sucks, it doesn't really matter. Moving on now, we have the first of many signings the Red Wings made today. This one was the biggest contract that they gave out. Andrew Kopp signs a 5-year, $28.125 million deal, so an AAV of $5.625 million. The Red Wings finally have a good second line center. It now bumps Pius Suter down to the third line center, and it just overall makes the team's center depth so much better. I'm a huge fan of this signing. The Red Wings desperately needed a guy like Andrew Kopp, who's most likely going to be playing in between Jacob Vrana and David Perron, who we'll talk about a little bit later, who the Red Wings also signed. He's a very effective penalty killer as well, and the Red Wings penalty kill has been god-awful, especially this past season, so he should do wonders for them in that aspect of the game as well. He's from Michigan. He's good friends with Dylan Larkin. It seems like it's going to be a great fit, and as a Red Wings fan, it's really exciting to me that Steve Yzerman is now now, kind of making some moves to actually try and move the needle a little bit. The next deal saw Troy Stecher sign a 1-year, $1.2 million contract with the Arizona Coyotes. When Stecher was in Detroit, I really liked him. I think he does well in a bottom pairing role. He's a great skater, and he's a guy the Coyotes should easily be able to flip for like a mid to late round draft pick at the upcoming deadline. Next up, we have another one of the moves the Red Wings made, signing Olli Maatta to a 1-year, $2.25 million contract. I think this is a really solid get for Detroit. They had some gaping holes on the left side after Danny DeKeyser and Mark Stahl left. This is a guy who's more likely than not going to be playing in Detroit's top four, either paired with Seider or Hronek. He's had really good defensive analytics over the past couple of seasons. Quietly was just really solid for the Los Angeles Kings this past year, so hopefully he can bring some of that defensive savvy to Detroit, who needs it badly. Moving on, we have another one of the bigger deals that took place today. Claude Giroux signing a 3-year, $19.5 million contract with the Ottawa Senators, an annual cap hit of $6.5 million. In my opinion, this is literally like the perfect contract for a guy like Claude Giroux at the point he's at in his career. He's 34 years old, so the term only being 3 years I think is fantastic, and $6.5 million for a guy who's still as good as Claude Giroux is, that's great value. He's not just a legit top 6 forward, he's still a very good top line forward who has good impacts at both ends of the ice, capable of driving the play. We know he can still put up the points. Ottawa's going to have a much better power play now with the likes of Giroux and Alex DeBrincat, and I think it was really important for Ottawa to add a good veteran to that really young top 6, and now they have a top 6 that consists of DeBrincat, Giroux, Batherson, Tkachuk, Norris, and Stützle. That could be pretty nasty. I'll talk about these next two deals together. The Blackhawks signed both Andreas Athanasiou and Max Domi to 1-year, $3 million contracts, and to me this just screams we need NHL caliber players because they literally got rid of most of their forwards, and I think this is smart. Obviously both Athanasiou and Max Domi are talented offensive players. They're capable of putting up points. They're both most likely going to be playing a lot of minutes in a top 6 role, getting special teams time as well. If they can put up big numbers the first half of the season, the Hawks should be able to fetch a decent return for both of them at the deadline. Next up, we had defenseman Ilya Lyubushkin sign a 2-year, $5.5 million deal with the Buffalo Sabres, so an annual cap hit of $2.75 million. I think this is a fine get for Buffalo. Lyubushkin is a good defensive defenseman, big and physical, should be able to eat up some good minutes for the Sabres in the top 4, and they needed a guy like that, and honestly, he could even play with Rasmus Dahlin. Their games may be able to complement each other. You know, Lyubushkin hold down the physicality aspect and the defensive side of the game, while Dahlin can kind of go rush, do his thing offensively. Moving on now, this was a relatively big signing. Ilya Mikheyev signs a 4-year, $19 million contract with the Vancouver Canucks, a cap hit of $4.75 million per season. I've seen some people kind of hating on the Canucks for this one, and yeah, sure, maybe $4.75 million is a little bit rich, but he just had a career high 21 goals and 32 points this past season. He is a very, very effective penalty killer. I think he's going to fit in real nicely in Vancouver's middle 6, and he's only 27 years old, so the fact that this is just a 4-year deal as opposed to, 6 or 7 or something like that makes me like it a lot more for Vancouver. Moving on, goaltender Yaroslav Halak signs a 1-year, $1.55 million deal with the New York Rangers. I think this is fine. There's not really a whole lot to dive into here. They needed a backup after trading Georgiev, but when you're in a position like the Rangers where you have a guy like Shesterkin who you know is going to play 60 plus games if he stays healthy, you don't really need to go out and overpay on a backup or trade a bunch of assets away for one. You just need, in my opinion, a solid veteran who can give you 15 to 20 decent performances a year, and I think Halak should be able to do that. Next up, Frank Vatrano signs a 3-year, $11 million contract with the Anaheim Ducks, an AAV of $3.65 million. I like this ad for the Anaheim Ducks, especially at that cap hit. Frank Vatrano should be able to come in, give them some nice secondary scoring in the middle 6. Vatrano has scored 18 goals in each of the past 2 seasons. He's had a 24-goal season before as well. The next deal saw goaltender Eric Comrie sign a 2-year, $3.6 million deal with the Buffalo Sabres, so an AAV of $1.8 million. I'm happy for Eric Comrie. Honestly, he's been a bit of a journeyman the past couple years. Seems like he's always on waivers. This is his first NHL contract, getting paid over $1 million, so good for him. Had a .920 save percentage this past season for the Jets in 19 appearances, so I think this is a safe bet for the Buffalo Sabres. It looks like they're going to be going into next season with the tandem of Eric Comrie and Craig Anderson. Moving on, Vladislav Nemesnikov signs a 1-year, $2.5 million deal with the Tampa Bay Lightning, so he goes back to the team he started his career with. He was a first-round pick by Tampa back in 2011. 1 year, $2.5 million for Nemesnikov. I like that a lot for Tampa. He has good defensive impacts, capable of playing middle 6 minutes, and he had 16 goals last year. That was the second most he's ever had in a season, so he's capable of chipping in offense as well. Should definitely help Tampa replenish some of that depth up front that they lost with Palat being on the outs. The St. Louis Blues went out and got goaltender Thomas Greiss on a 1-year, $1.5 million deal, so they got their backup after Ville Husso left, a much more cheaper option, obviously, than Ville Husso would have been. been. As a Red Wings fan, I can tell you that Thomas Grice's good games have been really good the past couple seasons, but his bad games have been really bad, so he's kind of streaky, but he shouldn't have much of a workload anyways. This is a pure backup situation for Thomas Greiss, not a 1A, 1B kind of thing. Binnington is going to play, I would say, 80% of the games. Moving on, another one of the bigger contracts that was given out today, Darcy Kuemper signs a 5-year, $26.3 million deal to become the new starter of the Washington Capitals, a AAV of $5.25 million. I think the $5.25 million cap hit for Darcy Kuemper is great. I've seen people saying that was a little bit too high, but I mean, he's been one of the better goaltenders in the league. He's been lights out since like 2018. Obviously, recency bias, he didn't have the greatest playoff run with Colorado, but he was still good enough for them to win the cup. There's obviously always a little bit of risk involved when you sign a guy like Darcy Kuemper, who's 32 years old, to a 5-year deal, but again, I think the cap hit is great, and Washington needed a starting goaltender after letting Samsonov walk and trading Vanacek, and they got arguably the best one available this offseason. Next, the New Jersey Devils signed defenseman Brendan Smith to a 2-year, $2.2 million contract, so an AAV of $1.1 million. Depth defenseman, can also play a little bit of forward if you need him to and be a physical forechecker in that role. He's a versatile guy, probably won't be in the lineup every single night, but he's a decent ad at 1.1. Next, the Washington Capitals signed another goaltender, this one Charlie Lindgren, to a 3-year, $3.3 million contract, so an AAV of $1.1 million. And hey, good for Charlie Lindgren. This is a guy who's been an AHL goaltender for the majority of his career. He only has 29 NHL games under his belt. 5 of those came this past season with the Blues, where he put up a .958, so I'm guessing that's why Washington took this gamble on him. But it's not like he's going to have to do too much anyways, because obviously Washington signed Darcy Kuemper, and as long as Kuemper stays healthy, he's going to be playing, 80 to 85% of the games. Moving on, we have a pretty significant signing here. Mason Marchment signs a 4-year, $18 million deal with the Dallas Stars, so an AAV of $4.5 million. I'm going to feel really happy for Mason Marchment getting this kind of payday. He was one of the more random breakout players in recent memory. Like, his 2021-22 season was fascinating. In just 54 games, had 18 goals and 47 points, obviously career highs across the board, and he did it in like 4th line minutes, and that's the fascinating thing about it. In Dallas now, though, he should definitely be thrust into a bigger role. I would say based off of the money they gave him, he should be playing 2nd line minutes, so we'll see what he's able to do now in that kind of role. Next, we saw the St. Louis Blues sign centerman Noel Acciari to a 1-year, $1.25 million contract, a depth addition for the Blues, most likely going to be playing in a 4th line role. Overachieved a couple seasons ago in Florida and had 20 goals, but that's not really the kind of player he is and what St. Louis should expect here. Next up, we have another depth deal. The Chicago Blackhawks signed Colin Blackwell to a 2-year, $2.4 million contract, so an AAV of $1.2 million. I feel the same way about this one as I do about the Domi and Athanasiou signings. They needed NHL caliber players to fill out the roster, and Blackwell is definitely capable. He has kind of sneaky finishing ability as well. He's shown that the past couple seasons. Another player that Chicago should be able to flip for a mid to late round pick down the line. The Florida Panthers replaced some of the depth that they lost by signing Nick Cousins to a 2-year, $2.2 million deal, so a $1.1 million AAV. Nick Cousins was decent for the Nashville Predators this past season in a bottom 6 role, had 9 goals, which is the 2nd highest he's put up in a single season before. I'd imagine he's going to do just fine in Florida and play kind of a similar role to the one that Acciari played for the Panthers the past couple years. Next, the St. Louis Blues signed Oscar Lindblom to a 2-year, $5 million deal, so a $2.5 million AAV after he was bought out by the Philadelphia Flyers. Really happy for Lindblom here, happy there was interest in him. Such an amazing comeback story, and he's a useful player as well. I think this is a guy who has the offensive capabilities of being a perennial 15 goal scorer. This next signing is one from today that I honestly just cannot wrap my head around. The Columbus Blue Jackets signed defenseman Eric Branson to a 4-year, $16 million contract, so an AAV of $4 million per season. And I know he just had probably one of the better seasons of his career with the Calgary Flames, but there's a reason this guy's been bought out of contracts before. There's a reason he's been on so many teams. He's not a fantastic NHL defenseman. He is definitely a usable, bottom pairing, physical guy, but that's really it. So committing $16 million to him over the next 4 seasons, that's kind of crazy in my opinion, but I feel like it just speaks to how thin the market was for defensemen this free agency. There wasn't a lot of big name or great defensemen available, so that led to some of them getting overpaid, and we'll talk about another one here soon. This next deal involving a defenseman, though, is a guy that I don't think got overpaid at all. Jan Rutta signs a 3-year, $8.25 million deal with the Penguins, so a $2.75 million AAV. I think that's actually a really good deal for Pittsburgh, and considering what Manson got re-signing with Colorado, what Sherratt got in Detroit, and what Gudbranson got, who we just talked about, I think Penguins fans should be really happy about this. He's a two-time Stanley Cup champion, very reliable defensively, and also just had a career-high 18 points last season as well. Next up, we have another one of the big signings by the Red Wings, Ben Sherratt, 4 years, $19 million total, so a $4.75 million AAV. This one really shocked me, came out of nowhere, and I'll be the first to admit I don't like it. I don't like paying $4.75 million a season for Ben Sherratt as it is, even if it was just a 1 or 2 year deal, but it being 4 years makes me like it a lot less. And again, I feel like this just speaks to how thin the market was for defensemen this year's free agency, and Detroit, they had gaping holes on that left side, and they did fill them with Ole Mata and Ben Sherratt, but I just don't know how well Ben Sherratt's going to do, if he's going to be able to live up to that contract. The Seattle Kraken made a big splash, signing Andre Burakovsky to a 5-year, $27.5 million contract, so an annual cap hit of $5.5 million. I think this is a really solid signing for Seattle in my opinion. They really lacked goal scoring and finishing ability this past season. Burakovsky's a guy who scored 20 or more in a season twice, 15 or more in a season 4 times. He's got a good shot, lethal at scoring off the rush. He's going to bring a lot of what Seattle needs, and he's only 27. Like, he was one of the younger UFAs out there when you compare him to some of the other guys who are usually, 29, 30 in that range. As a Red Wings fan, I really love this next signing a lot. Dominic Kubalik to Detroit, $5 million total, 2-year deal, $2.5 million AAV. This is a guy who scored 30 goals as a rookie in just 68 games. Only a couple of seasons ago, he scored 15 or more in each of his 3 NHL seasons. He's got a really heavy shot, should be an absolute weapon on the power play, getting set up by the likes of Larkin and Raymond, and the power play is an area of the game Detroit needed to greatly improve, and Kubalik should definitely help with that. Next up, we saw the Florida Panthers sign Colin White to a 1-year, $1.2 million contract. He was bought out by the Ottawa Senators. He's 25 years old. He was a former first-round pick back in 2015. He's shown flashes at the NHL level before. He's had a 40-plus point season. I really like this bet by the Florida Panthers. What's the worst that could happen? He doesn't play well, and it's a $1.2 million cap hit for 1 year. Really can't go wrong here. Next, we have the final signing the Red Wings made, at least so far, and I love this one as well. David Perron is a Detroit Red Wing. This one came out of left field as well. 2-year deal, $9.5 million total, so a $4.75 million AAV. I think the $4.75 million is really cheap for a guy who's, scored at a 25-plus goal pace in each of the past 4 seasons. I would have been a little bit weary about this if it was like a 4 or 5 year deal, given Perron being 34 years old, but only 2 years, that's perfectly structured to me for the Red Wings, and this is a guy that, looking forward a little bit, but not this upcoming season, but the second year of Perron's deal, he could fetch Detroit a pretty big return at a trade deadline or something if they're not competing then. This next one's a bit of a weird one. Nicolas Deslauriers signs a 4-year, $7 million deal with the Philadelphia Flyers, just an AAV of $1.75 million, but I'm just a little bit confused as to why they'd commit $7 million to him over 4 years. I mean, he's nothing really more than a physical fourth liner who fights a lot, takes a lot of penalties, should definitely fit the identity of being a Philadelphia Flyer though, and John Tortorella's probably going to love him. Next up is another deal involving the Flyers. They signed defenseman Justin Braun to a 1-year, $1.75 million deal. Veteran depth defenseman, a guy the organization is familiar with. He played there from 2019 up until this most recent trade deadline where he was dealt to the Rangers. So they get him back here, and I don't think Philly's going to be great this upcoming season, so I can honestly see a scenario where he gets traded again at this upcoming trade deadline from Philadelphia. Now moving on to the final signing we'll talk about in this video, any other signings that happened tonight, and of course tomorrow. I'll do another one of these videos tomorrow and they'll be featured in that one. I just don't want this to be too long for you guys, and things are definitely slowing down, but nonetheless, Colin Miller signs a 2-year, $3.7 million deal with the Dallas Stars, so an annual cap hit of $1.85 million. Now for a guy who used to be known as an offensive defenseman, the offense has dried up a little bit in terms of points, but he's still a good skater, good at getting the puck up the ice quickly, should be just fine in Dallas. Okay, it looks like I lied. While I was editing, a bunch more signings happened, including Johnny Gaudreau, so I figured I had to add them into the day one review, and then the ones that happened after Johnny Gaudreau, we'll talk about them tomorrow. So the first one where we left off, Nico Sturm signs a 3-year, $6 million deal with the San Jose Sharks, so an annual cap hit of $2 million. Bit of a weird one here. Sturm's 27 years old, wasn't the most impactful player for Colorado after the trade deadline. He was a part of that Tyson Jost deal, didn't score a goal actually as a member of the Avalanche in the regular season or the playoffs. In his career, he's definitely had good two-way analytics, has had an 11-goal season before. Maybe there's something there that San Jose can get out of him. This next signing is one that I really like, the Carolina Hurricanes, so I said I thought I've had a great day in the Max Pacioretty trade video. They got Burns, they got Pacioretty, and they signed Andre Kasha to a 1-year deal with a cap hit of $1.5 million. Now, Ondrej Kase is way better than just $1.5 million, but I feel like the reason he didn't get, a longer term deal or more money than that somewhere else is just because of the concussion history there. Kase had a fantastic year in Toronto though. He's a great two-way middle six winger, would have scored 20 goals had he played in all 82 games. This is a very solid pickup for very cheap for Carolina. Moving on, the Seattle Kraken added defenseman Justin Schultz on a 3-year deal worth a total of $6 million, so an AAV of $2 million. Definitely not the defenseman he once was, but still capable of putting up respectable offensive numbers from the blue line. This is one of those signings where I don't really have a whole lot to say about it. I don't really like it for Seattle, but I also don't dislike it. I don't really feel any way about this for the Kraken, honestly. This next deal is a head scratcher, another one involving Seattle. They signed goaltender Martin Jones to a 1-year, $2 million deal, so now they have Chris Driedger, Philip Grubauer, and Martin Jones, and they have like over $11 million tied up in those three. And Martin Jones hasn't been good for a long time. This past season was the first year he put up a 900 or above save percentage since 2017-18, and he only just barely hit that mark. He finished with a 900 on the dot. I'm just really dumbfounded by this one, so let me know what you guys think. Why do you need Martin Jones when you already have Grubauer and Driedger? I know they didn't perform well last season, but do they plan on moving one of those contracts? I don't know. And now for real this time, the final deal we're going to talk about today, the biggest of the day, Johnny Gaudreau has signed with the Columbus Blue Jackets out of nowhere. This is strange. So apparently Elliot Friedman said, I think it is 7 by 9.8 million. So a 7-year deal, 9.8 mil AAV, which is weird because Frank Saravalli reported on that Columbus actually offered him 12 mil annually. I guess that can't be true, or Johnny Gaudreau would have taken that instead of signing with the same team for 9.8, right? But nonetheless, Gaudreau left money on the table to go to Columbus, and again, it was kind of just out of left field because like all day it was reported on that it was down between the Islanders and the Devils, and then bang, Elliot Friedman tweets out of nowhere, Gaudreau is going to Columbus. The full details of the contract aren't out yet, like the structure of the deal, if it's front-loaded, stuff like that, but it is 7 years, 9.8 mil AAV, so that is the biggest fish off the market. Johnny Gaudreau is a Blue Jacket, which I don't think anyone expected to say heading into this year's free agency. Another wrench kind of thrown into this is the fact that Patrick Laine is probably going to get traded now. I don't really know if you can afford to lock up both of those guys long term when you already have so much money invested in a guy like Zach Werenski. I don't really know, like we kind of all thought Columbus was rebuilding too, but I guess when you get the opportunity to sign a guy like Johnny Gaudreau, you do that. We saw the Rangers do that when Artemi Panarin was a UFA. Johnny Gaudreau is one of the elite wingers in the league. He obviously makes the Columbus Blue Jackets a much better team. He is the definition of a needle mover. He's an MVP caliber player, and Blue Jackets fans, man, I'm happy for you guys because I remember when Panarin left and Duchesne left and Bobrovsky left, all the media was saying, oh, what's it going to take for Columbus to keep a star? Nobody wants to play in Columbus. Well, now you just landed the biggest free agent since Artemi Panarin, which is pretty ironic because Panarin was leaving Columbus in that offseason. Does this jolt the Columbus Blue Jackets into playoff contention? I wouldn't go that far, but it puts them a hell of a lot closer. I'm sure they're going to be making more moves throughout the offseason now as well. So that is going to do it for my review of day one of the NHL free agent frenzy for 2022. What a crazy day it was. So many big deals, so many moves that kind of came out of left field. The Johnny Gaudreau one just capped off an incredible day. As you can tell, I'm losing my voice minute by minute. I keep recording. It is slipping away. So hopefully I'll actually be able to make videos tomorrow. If you guys enjoyed this video recapping day one of free agency, be sure to leave it a like. That is the best way to show your support. And most importantly, if you want to stay up to date with all the signings and trades throughout the offseason, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you all soon.